Taoiseach, these questions ask you to report on your discussions with your fellow leaders of the European Union member states. Now, do you, Taoiseach, have any appreciation, or your fellow EU leaders, of the increasingly harsh reality of life for huge swathes of ordinary working people in Europe, unemployed people and poor people, as a result of the continuing crisis of European capitalism and the austerity policy response by governments all over Europe, the so-called cure that is worsening the disease? Now, can I ask you, at your last EU summit a few weeks ago, as you meet behind these swathes of security and police to protect you from the people of Europe that you're supposed to represent, did anyone in that elite bubble of EU leaders look outside that bubble and raise the devastating report of the Red Cross on the economic and social effects of the crisis of austerity? And would it shock you at all, Taoiseach, to hear that this organisation, the Red Cross, which is sober and conservative, and that the Guardian newspaper sums up its finding as Europe sinking into a protracted period of deepening poverty, mass unemployment, social exclusion, greater inequality and collective despair as a result of austerity policies adopted in response to the debt and currency crisis, and that while other continents successfully reduce poverty, Europe adds to it? Does it shock you to find that compared to 2009, millions more find themselves queuing for food, unable to buy medicine or access healthcare, and those without a job, and even many who still have work, facing difficulties to sustain their families due to insufficient wages and skyrocketing prices? And lastly, Taoiseach, does it shock you that the report itself from the Red Cross sums up? 5 years ago, it would have been unimaginable. So many millions of Europeans lining up for food in soup kitchens, receiving food parcels at home, former middle-class citizens living in trailers, tents, railway stations, or in shelters for the homeless, hesitating to go to the Red Cross, and that there are now more than 18 million people receiving EU-funded food aid, 43 million who do not get enough to eat each day, and 120 million at risk of poverty in the countries covered by Eurostat. Isn't this truly shocking, Taoiseach? And lest anybody believe that the German workers are immune, the Red Cross finds 5.5 million Germans have lost their middle-class social status over the past decade and fallen into the ranks of low-income earners, while at the same time 500,000 others made the grade as high-income earners. Now, isn't it clear, Taoiseach, that you and your fellow European leaders have presided and continue to preside over a policy that is disastrous in its social and economic effects? Do you recognise this Europe? Does it ever feature in the meetings of the EU leaders? And do you understand that you are an integral part of the policy that is pushing millions to soup kitchens within Europe? This is the picture we used to have described for what we used to refer to as the third world. This is Europe. Isn't it clear, therefore, Taoiseach, that the financial market system, this dictatorship of the 1%, the bondholders, the massive big banks, that it's a disaster for our people, and that revolutionary changes in economic policy are needed to break this power of those who hold Europe in this vicious grip that is causing this horrific situation, and that public ownership of this huge wealth of the financial institutions and democratic control is necessary. Taoiseach, are you ashamed of the Europe that you and your fellow leaders have created?
Taoiseach.
Well, sure, that's the reason why political decisions have to be made to change that very situation. Do you think that anybody involved in politics, whatever their party, is happy with a situation where 26 million people are out of work within the European Union? Do you think that anybody is happy in politics, Deputy Higgins, that 6 million young people under 25 are unemployed? But you seem to think that you can suddenly change this by one of your financial instruments. Well, I'm sorry, but it does require fiscal discipline. It requires putting people's houses in order. It requires cutting out the waste. We are part of a global pattern here. You have 1 billion people on this planet who are obese. You have 1 billion people on this planet who are starving. You have 4.5 billion people in the middle sector. And for the first time in human history, dietary complications have passed out medical complications. There's an attitude and a culture problem here as much as anything else.